SCP is one of the most iconic horror franchises of the 2000s. These stories, these characters, are all part of such an interesting world that freaked the hell out of us as kids. SCP Containment Breach was a genius game that embodied the scare factor of SCP in a way I have never seen any other SCP game top. The atmosphere, the music, the health mechanics, the enemies, so much mystery and fear of death at any moment consumed your mind when first playing this game. The amount of depth is honestly ridiculous. It's a shame that Containment Breach is no longer in development. I missed the continuous updates this game got. I looked forward to learning more about the franchise with each one. Fortunately, SCP is a Creative Commons license, and anyone, including you, can create their own SCP game and carry the torch of the franchise. So far, there haven't been many of significance. A number of Containment Breach mods have been released, but these are just that, mods. SCP-5K has a small player base going for itself, and I think they are working up to something very fun, scary, and hopefully replayable. But it's currently in alpha, and we're awaiting its official release, which doesn't appear to be arriving anytime soon. There are a number of original SCP games being developed quietly away from the public eye, but just like 5K, we're awaiting all of them to release in a finished state. The only SCP game that has actually reached Containment Breach levels of success so far is SCP Secret Laboratory, a multiplayer game designed around the same Containment Breach scenario. It has kept people interested in the franchise in Containment Breach's absence. However, some people have expressed that it just doesn't hit the same. A number of development choices by Northwood throughout the years have led to people feeling deprived of the scare factor that made them so interested in SCP in the first place, including a recent video that got over 100,000 views. Northwood has since announced some upcoming content that aims to address this complaint, including horror stingers and chase themes. With that said, I think this future update raises some very interesting questions about our interest in being scared. The horror of this franchise is valuable. It's a key role in the nostalgia we feel for SCP. At the same time, Northwood is trying to balance their game in a way that is fair for all players. Is this a necessary evil, or an unfaithful change in direction? How important is horror for SCP games?
Godzilla 2000
There was another part of the game that helped create the feeling of horror throughout the facility.
versus Anguirus.
SCPSL's appeal is comedy and irony, not being spooky. Horror never lasts.
Monsters fight!
So what is it about horror that is so important to SCP fans? Well, horror utilizes fear to engage the player. Fear can only occur when there is a perceived threat of danger. Designing your game around provoking fear in the player is a very good way to make your characters feel dangerous, which makes them interesting and memorable. How does SCP Containment Breach use horror to make their characters feel dangerous? They do this by making them highly lethal, severely limiting available counterplay, and creating an unpredictable environment. When you encounter SCP-173, it has the potential to kill you instantly and can show up at any random moment. The restriction you have of needing constant line of sight can make you lose track of where you're going. That, combined with the lack of any means of fighting the entity, adds a lot of tension to the encounter. A very good way to protect yourself from 173 indefinitely is to lock yourself behind a door that requires keycard access. For example, the 914 containment room. 173 cannot follow you into these areas, giving you a safe haven from it. However, that does not mean you're completely safe. SCP-106 will appear out of the ground at random, who can phase right through any doors you attempt to close on it. Nine-tailed fox have keycards of their own that grant them access to these rooms. Check out the atmosphere of this place. The dark lighting where anything can pop out of, the ominous music, the gloom, grimy textures of the walls, floors, and structures, the countless instances of blood and corpses. Hell, there's an item that is literally a severed hand. All of this is a very subtle way of letting you know this place is hell in ways you don't even understand. This horror makes the SCP universe very ominous and mysterious, which sparks interest in its writing and Containment Breach's gameplay. How do modern SCP games like SL and 5K compare? In contrast to Containment Breach, where you can't directly fight hostile entities, modern SCP games tend to be centered around combating them. There are guns that are used to shoot and neutralize SCPs and hostile human classes. This alone takes away a lot of horror from the experience because the threat level isn't anywhere near as high. Sometimes they do attempt to compensate for this in other ways. I think the atmosphere of the first mission of 5K's campaign did a really good job at making the place feel dangerous. Some of SL's latest work on horror stingers and chase themes sound really promising as well. However, there are no shortage of things that can be nitpicked as less scary. These right here are called fledglings, a modified variant of SCP-008. 008 was also in Containment Breach. Just listen to each of their sound effects yourself, and you tell me which you think sounds more impactful. I don't feel it's necessary for me to point out things about SL that reduce horror, as the viral TheDeviousMelon video that got tons of attention has already done that, so I'll just play a few clips from his video because he explains it very well.
But now everything in the game has to be brightened up for readability. What's a containment breach of deadly monsters without the power of the sun? Like this guy that was ripped apart. But the surrounding area is in pristine condition, lit up nice and cozy for Christmas.
When it comes to being scary, I think 5K does a bit of a better job than SL does, but I also think neither of these games come anywhere close to what we had in Containment Breach. Atmospheric qualities can be improved upon, but at their core, they are very different games that function in very different ways, which inevitably affects their horror value. I think that fact raises an interesting question of, is that really such a bad thing? I had lots of fun shooting through Ghost of the Southgate in 5K. The combat loop with SCP-610 was something I found very engaging. Those long shootouts between Chaos and MTF and SL are also very fun. It is definitely not as scary being able to fight back, but it adds a different source of fun that Containment Breach doesn't have. So, is it really so important for every SCP game to be scary? On one hand, maintaining the vibes that made it popular remains faithful to what we associate SCP with, which maintains the feeling of immense danger and mystery. Don't you think it would be weird to have an Outlast reality TV show? On the other, disregarding horror opens up so many creative possibilities for other types of games. Exploring different genres opens up the door to attract different audiences. This expands the reach of the franchise, keeping it alive and thriving. Isn't that a good thing? I think SCP games should have a balance. I believe it is a good thing to explore different experiences, but unless you're making a joke game, you should also at least try to have some layer of spook. The least you can do is make an ominous atmosphere. I've been developing my own SCP game for over a year now. I would like to have a scary environment of my own. A lot of the work to make that happen involves art, 3D modeling, texturing, drawing, and sound design. I am not at this stage of development yet. My entire focus for the past year has been learning how to use the Godot engine. I had no prior experience in game development prior to this project, so it was more important than anything else that I knew how to code and knew how to implement the functionality I envisioned. If you would like to see the latest progress on the project, check out my latest devlog in the end screen right here. If you are interested in the continued development of this game, let me know by liking and subscribing.